Did we get the...
Here we go. Welcome to Hoops HD Report. Special live from Southern Illinois. Rocco Miller. Rocco, go for it.
Excellent report. But Rocco is on site, on scene. There he is. I don't think he can hear us, but there he is. So, Rocco,
go for it.
I can't hear you.
Tell us about the game.
Right now, Southern Illinois is trailing 31-27 against Buffalo. It's been a good half. Tune in for the second half. Have a great show, guys.
What a report. All right.
Unlike Lido Vecchio, at least he was courageous enough to come on camera, so we have to applaud Mr. Rocco here.
No, that is the best start to a show we've ever had.
Well, guys, welcome to the Hoops HD Report. That was Rocco Miller coming to us live from Southern Illinois in a classic Hoops HD moment. I'm Chad Sherwood. I got David Griggs and John Titel up here, John Stalika and Joby Fortson down below. This is our first regular season Hoops HD Report. And
yes,
what do we do during these shows? We are going to
Yes, we are.
Okay. What's going on, David?
Nebraska is ranked number 1 in the Sagarin ratings. Finally, a poll that does it right. They beat one of the 10 best teams in the state of Louisiana, and when you're beating top 10 teams by 60 points, you just go straight to the top.
Well, I'll give David credit. Nebraska is ranked number 1, and let's go ahead. We're going to discuss all the conferences today. We're also going to take a look.
There's no need. All we need to talk about is Nebraska.
After that, we're going to talk about some of the exempt tournaments that are coming up, not only this week, but coming up in the next several weeks. But I'm going to go ahead and put something up on the screen here. Hopefully we can see it. And let's start in the Big Ten because David started us off there. And right there, line number 7 on this standings, but you can see Jeff Sagarin currently has Nebraska as the number 1 team in the nation. David, I got to give you credit that, there's just no getting around that.
Well, it's not just Sagarin. As you can see there, they're first place in the NET. They're first place in the KPI. It is just a sweep of excellence.
Jeff Sagarin, somebody who relies heavily on scoring margin. Nebraska, 2 games, 106-37 over Mississippi Valley, 87-35 over Southeastern Louisiana. And when you beat everybody by 60 points, you end up number 1. But let's actually talk a little bit about Big Ten. And I guess, Stalika, let me start with you. The big game this week, I guess, was the Ohio State-Cincinnati game. Am I right? Is that the biggest game the conference has had so far?
I could have sworn the biggest game would have been Ohio State hosting the Purdue JV that's now calling themselves Purdue Fort Wayne. But it was certainly, if you thought Ohio State at Cincinnati was going to be a fluke, the Buckeyes certainly showed you can't be sleeping on them with a 41-point blowout in which Fort Wayne's coach was also very complimentary of the Buckeyes' early effort.
We're getting a little noise there. I think we get that figured out. But Titel, the other big game, I guess, was the Kansas-Michigan State game on opening night. And Michigan State was down for most of the game, made a little bit of a run late, but Kansas did hold on.
They did. And the thing is, they didn't do it exactly how I thought they would. I thought they were really going to rely on the veteran presences in guys like Azubuike and LaGerald Vick and stuff like that. Instead, they had 2 newcomers leading the way. Dedrick Lawson, obviously, he comes with great credentials from Memphis. He proved it, 20 points, 14 boards, 6 assists, does it all, and is looking like an All-American after a week of the sport this season. The other freshman guard, Quentin Grimes, McDonald's All-American, and so I had high hopes for him. He exceeded them. 21 points, made 6 threes. This team seems stacked top to bottom, big to small, starters a bench. You don't beat Michigan State unless you're a real legit team, and they are a real team.
Right. And let me just briefly go back. For those of you that are new to our show, you're seeing these standings on the screen here. Just to give you a brief explanation of what they are, there's various columns here. The net column there is the new NCAA ranking, the net ranking. They're not going to be released till December. So, David, everybody's number one in them.
Right. Yeah.
And the RPI column is the old RPI formula that we're still going to be tracking at least. And SOS is strength of schedule. We have 3 resume-based metrics. KPI, which also doesn't come out till sometime in December. ESPN's strength of resume. And Joby, let me bring you in here. Your JNGs just started coming out today. This is your
today. And I did fudge. I will admit I'm fudging that, saying Canisius, Colorado, and Niagara, who hadn't played yet, all had 0-0 games in their first one, just so I could have something out there. Is out right now. If you took a loss, look at Michigan State. If you took a loss, they're the only ones in the Big Ten who did, so they're last place. But really, it's very early. But you get a feel. You start to get a feel. We'll get to it down the road. But what I find interesting are the 4 number 1 seeds, if you were to seed out the J&G, are Duke, North Carolina, Kansas, and Gonzaga. 4 pretty – if all of a sudden you told me at the end of the year, hey, those are the 4 number 1 seeds overall, you probably go, oh, okay, yeah, it makes sense. So already it's showing some strength.
Yeah, Joby, just a point of clarification. You said that those 3 teams that you just put in that their record was 0-0 to get
with
it
a
out
game
there.
Played, yeah. I said that they tied their game 0-0 so they could have a game.
That makes sense, and I can only assume.
Terms, you can't have a denominator that is 0 and it gets swung by when you have total games as a 0. I mean, it's kind of geeky math thing, but yeah.
Yeah, and I can only assume that that's kind of what's throwing everything out of whack and why Nebraska's 37th instead of first.
Yeah. Hey, Nebraska's in the field, though. That's the point. Nebraska is well inside the field because there are so many under-the-radar conferences whose leader is inside the bubble, you could say, that the top 57 in the J&G would be at-large worthy or better. And we'll talk about it later, but the funny one that I have is right now one of the playing games is an all-SEC matchup. The other playing game is Virginia-Villanova.
Yeah. Well, I did my bracket today. In looking at the scores here, before we move on real quick, Chad, not to hijack it, Ohio State's win at Cincinnati, is that the only win the conference has so far that's not a bye game? And I know it's the first week, but yeah, I think – and we're going to be seeing that a lot tonight, I think.
It is. When you look at those, the conference has not played much in terms of tough games so far. Just real quickly, though, I want to quickly finish up the other metrics here. POM is KenPom, BPI is ESPN also, Sagarin ratings are there, various different KenPom metrics, AP and coaches poll on the far right. By the way, there is no new coaches poll during the first full week of the season. I don't know why. The AP numbers are today's numbers. Coaches polls are still the preseason numbers until next week. So that's why you're going to see some discrepancies as we go ahead between those 2 numbers. But let's take a quick look at the upcoming games in the Big Ten. It's actually a big week for the conference. Tonight we have Utah and Minnesota. Actually, it's going on just as we record this, but we've got the Gavitt games this week. Georgetown, Illinois, Wisconsin, Xavier, Marquette, Indiana, Michigan, Villanova, Seton Hall, Nebraska. What else is in there? Ohio State, Creighton, Penn State, DePaul, and Titel, St. John's, Rutgers. I know you're big on Rutgers this season already.
I don't think I've ever been big on Rutgers, but they're killing it. I mean, they're not beating Division III schools. Granted, they're playing home games and beating the likes of Fairleigh Dickinson and Drexel, but still Division I wins. And they're doing it with the long ball. The team is shooting 56.5% from behind the arc, number 4 in the nation. Go Scarlet Knights.
Yes, indeed. Go Scarlet Knights. And that was their problem in past years with shooting, which is it's an amazing turnaround. But David, you mentioned, I mean, there's a lot of tests for the Big Ten this coming week after a bye game first week.
Yeah, I know, and the Gavitt games have a lot to do with that. But I mean, again, some really, really good matchups. One in particular, Ohio State going to Creighton. Those are 2 teams that we thought were rebuilding a little bit, but Ohio State already won a road game in a pretty hostile environment. Creighton, it is a bit of a snake pit. It's hard to win there. But if Ohio State gets that one, are we already talking about them as not just a potential tournament team, but a first ballot, maybe top 25 team to get 2 road wins like that already?
I would say yes to a degree, but I am not sold 100% on Creighton. And Cincinnati, yeah, rock fight, in-state. That's the one that really impresses me just because of the heightened nature of it. But I'm not saying Cincinnati is the same level they were last year. We'll get there, but the American is not rising.
Oh, yeah. We're going to be talking a little bit American hoops in a few minutes here. But Title, let me throw it over to you here. Huge game coming up Wednesday night. Kind of a little bit of a rematch. I think these two teams played like 6-7 months ago, didn't they?
Yes, you might recall it as the last game of the season last April. A little different, obviously, because they both lost so many players either to graduation or to the NBA draft for those leaving early, but still two great coaches and two great programs. So if you have to watch one game this week, I would circle that one.
Yeah, Michigan at Villanova there. But let's take a look. Let's take a look at the other half of the Gavitt games there. Let's take a look over at the Big East and what happened. And Sleeka, you being our Big East guy, let me bring you in. Only one lost the conference there, and it was Providence's loss to Wichita State, kind of surprisingly on Friday night.
It seemed a little bit surprising because Wichita State lost their home opener to Louisiana Tech, but Providence is one of those teams. They're always going to be up and down, but Providence, they did open up with the win against Siena, but on the neutral court at Navy is actually where the Wichita State loss took place. But also teams like Xavier and Creighton also having a few close calls, including the Musketeers, where they actually gave up a school record 17 three-pointers against Evansville. Could they have been looking ahead to Wisconsin a little bit?
Well, here I'll bring up the upcoming schedule in the Big East. This is probably the more interesting part. Again, we already mentioned the games of the Gavitt games, but David, we're going to get a little better test about the Big East, a little better information again about this conference this week as well, aren't we?
Yeah, Xavier and Wisconsin matching up again. That's not a fixture game, but believe it or not, but it seems like they've met in one way or another, over the past several years. So they're actually kind of familiar with each other. Marquette, Indiana, looking forward to that one. Again, Marquette into the rankings right now, a lot of expectations for them, and Indiana much improved. Seton Hall in Nebraska, that's probably not going to be that exciting. But Ohio State, Creighton, interesting on this game. Ohio State already a big win at Cincinnati. If they go out to Creighton and win, do we have to start thinking about them as a tournament caliber team?
Now that we are replaying ourselves, let me go back to where I was going to start the show until David hijacked us into the Big Ten. And Joby, let me bring you in here on the ACC. Yeah. The only undefeated conference in the nation, not a single loss yet by an ACC team. Despite some strugglers, I think, in some of the bye games, they all turned it on and won the games.
Yeah, I think this is an indication the ACC is back. Yes, the majority of these, the vast majority, are bye games. But there's some really nice heads that were gotten for the conference. Obviously, Duke, Kentucky leads that. But Florida State, Florida, you got to all of a sudden – that's a big one for the conference, Florida State, Florida. And then another one another pair that I really like is not just the fact that Carolina won on the road to some of their in-state brethren, but it's the fact that they look good doing it. Carolina also is coming off another win tonight against Stanford at home. North Carolina showing that, hey, they're hitting on all cylinders. They have that nice pairing of Little and some of the freshmen along with Luke May. Wow. Okay, Carolina, you got my attention.
Right, and to build on what Joby just said, the win at Wofford, I know if you watch Under the Radar, you know this. If you don't, you may not. Wofford is really good. Wofford might not lose at home the rest of the year. So while I'm not going to overstate it and say it's going to be the biggest game North Carolina wins all year, but it wasn't a bye game at all. That was a good win for North Carolina.
If you want to look at the results as far as the bye games, the only one that seemed to be in a little bit of doubt was Boston College at home against St. Francis Brooklyn, but that was a game they did end up finally pulling away in the final 2 minutes.
Oh, no, they were down at the half to Milwaukee on opening night as well. Virginia didn't totally put Towson away until late. We saw, several other games. But Title, what about this Duke team, though? What they did to Kentucky, they then beat Army as well. The only thing I took away from the Army game is the Army looked better than Kentucky did, but what about them?
Army looked fantastic. The thing is, you bring in the hotshot freshman class of Barrett and Redditch and Williamson. you're like, oh, they're going to be good and they'll be high draft picks after 1 year in the lottery. They really exceeded my already high expectations. The 3 guys combined in their first ever college game, 83 points and only 3 turnovers. They're not guys who are trying to do too much and throwing the ball out of bounds and traveling. They're scoring points against at the time, top 5 team, no longer. Zion looks like the second coming of Sean Kemper, Blake Griffin. He does everything. I thought he just dunked. The rebounds, he can run the floor, he can block shots. He really seems like the real deal. Barrett is the quietest 30-point scorer I've ever seen. They're really an amazing freshman class, possibly the best ever.
Yeah, and let's take a quick look at what's coming up ahead this week in the ACC. Again, a few more better tests. Joby, what are you really looking forward to in this upcoming week in the ACC?
I am looking to see, that make sure that Duke doesn't, that Duke-San Diego State game, because that's sort of that on a neutral court if the freshmen are totally looking past it. But the game that really pops to me is I love what I'm seeing out of Vermont early. Watch out, Louisville. You're going to find out a lot about Louisville in that game because Vermont can beat you. And we're going to find out tonight as this is filming if that is the case with Vermont and Kansas going at.
Right. Also circle that Saturday, William & Mary at Notre Dame. We don't know what to expect from this Notre Dame team coming in, and it is a good William & Mary team.
Yeah, that was one that I had my eye on.
Well, let's go ahead and David, while I'm with you, let's take a look over at the Big 12, where we already discussed Kansas a little bit at the top of the show. But and I guess I got to throw this out there. The score's not up there as you guys watch watch this podcast. Should go final. But right now, Oklahoma is at Texas San Antonio, who lost to non-D1 St. Edwards already, and is losing by a point in the second half. So
they're losing. Yeah, they're losing, and over on the other channel, Texas, who really had to sweat out Arkansas. And watching that Arkansas game, I was like, well, man, the Razorbacks must be better than I thought. Winning that one in overtime, one of the more exciting games of the opening week, really sweating out Monroe at home right now.
Right, and then
let's also put a pin on this Oklahoma game. All right, out of 353 teams, Texas San Antonio is tied for 352nd. That means they're dead last. Dead last. Oklahoma, Boomer? I don't know, Sooner.
Well, I don't know. And Titel, West Virginia with the loss at home to Buffalo, albeit Buffalo is a pretty good team. Oklahoma State lost to Charlotte. Baylor, the loss to Texas Southern. Big step back so far from the Big 12 from what we've seen so far?
Small step back because they're losing to decent teams. Texas Southern has made the tournament many times, and Buffalo, as I remember, only too well made the tournament last March. The thing about
Charlotte?
Sure, they're pretty average too. But
Charlotte was they might be better this year, but they were in the 300s last year.
Buffalo win amazing on a couple levels. One, C.J. Matzenberg goes crazy and scores 43 points in 41 minutes on the road against West Virginia. Number two, the Bulls were down 13 with 7 minutes left, but the reason they won, they have veterans. They only committed 11 turnovers in 45 minutes. And despite the fact that Sagaba Kanate, or as I like to call him, Sabado Higante, is an amazing big guy for West Virginia, Buffalo out-rebounded the Mountaineers 50-46. How does that happen?
What I want to know is how does losing to Charlotte happen because the 49ers did not even qualify for the Conference USA tournament last year?
They didn't they? I think they lost their opening game to somebody bad.
And actually the shocker was the game that didn't happen. Bakersfield is awful, and they came within a whisker of TCU, who I think all of us had as solidly in the tournament. I think every one of us had him wearing white. Now, hey, one blip, you got out of there with a win, maybe you'll improve. But, man, that's not good. That's not good.
And David, there's the upcoming schedule for this week for the Big 12. Kind of circle Sunday here. Both these Oklahoma teams struggling, and both of them getting tough tests with Wofford and Charleston there.
Yeah, well, I mean, Wofford's a better team. I mean, that's almost the other way around. I'll be kind of surprised if Wofford doesn't win that one. But these are teams – I mean, these are games that this league has to win. Kansas is taking care of business. But they like you already alluded to, this conference has dropped a couple bye games or come close to it, and they're not out of the gate. This is a league that we're used to seeing get 6 and 7 teams out of 10 in the tournament every year. And while you don't want to overreact to one bad week, it's not a good start, and it's not very encouraging.
I know you probably don't even want to do it, but let's take a look at the Pac-12 here, where we've got a few losses. Colorado, the most impressive team so far. No?
Yeah.
They're undefeated. The USC game down at the bottom there was amazing to me. Vanderbilt goes across the country with a young team and ekes out the win over a solid Trojan team with a solid coach in Andy Enfield. I hate giving ASU any credit, but this Luke Wynn's Dort guy, if you haven't seen him, they're a freshman from Canada playing amazing. He might end up as first team all Pac-12 as a freshman. It's unbelievable.
Well, and Rocco is not with us other than at the top of the show, and we saw him from the basketball game. But his Washington team first goes and takes care of Western Kentucky. Actually, Western Kentucky was in there for most of that game, but ended up with a fairly big score. But then just gets hammered at Auburn and followed it up with their bus catching on fire on the way out of there, Stalika. But I'm sure you were up on that story.
Yeah, that was certainly not one of Washington's better days, and that was actually a pretty decent road trip from, Auburn out to Montgomery, where their plane was going to be taking off back to Seattle. But thankfully, nobody hurt in that bus accident.
Yeah, nobody hurt.
For real.
and out in China there, Cal just did what Cal does, which is just not play basketball. I don't know what happened out there.
Ivy League, man, what are you gonna do?
But let's take a look at the upcoming week here in the Pac-12. Joby, let me bring you in on this as they come up on the screen here in a second. Tell me what if anything, you're looking forward to here.
Well, I'm looking forward to Drake playing Colorado so they can finally help my formula get going.
Okay.
But in all seriousness, it is the next Monday, the big Monday type games. I mean, Arizona State, Mississippi State, Arizona, Iowa State. Next Monday is going to be showdown week for a lot of these teams. And hey,
as they start those exempt tournaments, actually.
Yeah, exactly. Cal, St. John's. You say, well, what about that? That's going to be to determine if your conference is going to get bids or not, because those wins, maybe St. John's doesn't make the tournament, maybe Cal doesn't make the tournament. But
Cal will not make
the tournament. But if Cal pulls off the win against St. John's, it brings the whole conference up, because all of a sudden your worst team starts bringing up the rear end. Contrast if St. John's loses, it's a hit for that Big East that after Villanova is just a swath of bubble teams in a lot of ways. These type of games matter right now, long term for a conference's health.
Yeah.
Well, David, let's turn over to the SEC. Last of the Power 6 conferences we haven't discussed yet, though we've got a few more leagues to talk about after this. A few losses in here, although I don't know that any of them were awful.
Not really, no. And again, I don't think Kentucky losing to Duke, I think it was more embarrassing than it was damaging. They're going to be just fine. If anything, it kind of refocuses you and gets everybody in gear and kind of elevates that. Stony Brook winning at South Carolina was kind of surprising. The Eaters winning at Texas A&M, but we kind of like this UC Irvine team. Again, if you watch Under the Radar, we're kind of big on them, so I wouldn't call that awful either. But I agree with that.
All right. And take a quick look at the upcoming week here. Should be flashing up on the screen right there. Starting tomorrow night, Memphis, LSU, and Georgia Temple among the games there. Titel, what about some of these upcoming games here? We've got A&M at Gonzaga coming up on Thursday as well.
That's the one I have circled. I wish we could have seen this one last year when Texas A&M had all that talent that left for the NBA draft. I assume Gonzaga is going to destroy them after A&M heads to the Northwest, but I wish we could have seen this one last year.
And Stalika, you want to discuss Mississippi College at Auburn. We've only got 5 minutes for it, so you got the next 5 minutes.
Yeah, this is not going to be a game that's going to be counting in the SEC standings, but I have no clue as to what division Mississippi's classified.
It's not one.
Chad, I will give one team some credit for their scheduling of strong, for lack of a better word, under the radar. LSU this past week beat UNC Greensboro, who's a good, solid team, tournament team last year. Then they go out and they play Memphis, and then watch Louisiana Tech, who is a lot better than people realize.
Well, they won at Wichita.
Yeah, give LSU credit. That is the sort of resume subtle resume build that will help LSU, because last year their RPI was god-awful in a factor, not the factor, but a factor in them missing the tournament. They basically said, no more. We're going to actually play real teams out of conference. Why? Good for you, LSU. Learn from your mistakes, improve, and maybe we'll see LSU get that 11th or 12th seed if they're on the bubble because of their strength of schedule in doing games like this.
Well, coming up next Monday night, next Monday, the start of their exempt tournament, I believe, Auburn and Xavier. Sleepy, you're a Xavier guy. You want to give us a prediction on that game, a preview?
I can predict that Xavier is going to be going from probably one of the slower-paced teams in Wisconsin to a much more hectic team against Auburn. I don't like that matchup this year as far as Xavier depths go, especially with Quentin Gooden actually starting the season injured and actually missed their opener. But I think there's a decent chance Xavier actually ends up 2-2 before getting maybe one win at Maui. But Auburn, I think they beat Xavier, but hard to beat Duke, but probably looking at a possible third-place finish in Maui for the Tigers.
I think Auburn will do horrible things to Xavier.
Let's go from some of these good conferences to something that is not good.
Well, there's one that's – this isn't even the worst one. Here we go.
A very, very, very bad start to the season for the American, as you see, SMU losing to Southern Miss. You see Central Florida losing to Florida Atlantic. You see the Cincinnati loss we discussed already. I don't know who else lost in this conference. It seems like
Louisiana Tech beating Wichita State. Now, I think that is because Louisiana Tech's good, but
probably the only thing of note is Wichita State's win over Providence. But Joby, American not rising.
Not rising. This conference is really killing themselves right now. You've got to – hey, they can go out, like I said, Wichita State, they made up for their mistake or, and maybe, like I said, Louisiana Tech winds up with 26, 27 wins. I'm not kidding when I say that. But you can't do this, SMU. You bring down the whole conference when you do things like that. You really can't afford these silly losses. Florida Atlantic, Central Florida, what are you doing, Central Florida? People were kind of talking, hey, maybe they can make the tournament.
Now, here's the odd thing about the Central Florida game is that they were actually called for goaltending on what was a shot that was going to go down anyway. That once it cleared the net, yeah, but what I'm saying is once it cleared the net, the clock was 000. But at the time of the goaltend, it actually gave Central Florida, I think, 0.8 seconds left, which would have been conceivably enough time for a catch and shoot.
That's yeah.
But when you do this to yourself as a conference, and David, let me ask you, you're just not giving yourself those you're giving yourself weaker strengths of schedule, which is going to affect everybody going in, because now those conference games against teams like even the East Carolinas and the Tulanes are just not going to be as good of a games, and it's just it has a net effect all season long, doesn't it?
It does. Now, again, it's the first week. I mean, they could come out next week and just go blistering through it and rebound from this. But you're right in the sense that, not only is the overall win total down, which keeps, at least with the RPI and probably with the NET to an extent, which keeps the league from propelling itself forward when it gets into league play. You don't have these in Houston, Memphis, South Florida taking care of business so far. Temple been one of the more impressive teams, but all they've really done is win bye games minus Wichita's win out at Providence, and they've even lost some bye games. So it does kind of get weighted down when it makes it harder for teams to emerge when you get out of the gate slow like this.
Look at the right. Keep it on that screen.
Oh,
No other conference has as many teams with the at on the right side of the page. Yeah, no other conference we've talked about has at Wichita State lose, at Cincinnati lose, at East Carolina lose, at SMU lose, at Central Florida lose, at Tulane lose. No other conference has that.
I think we're about to get to one that does.
Okay.
We will in a second here, but let's take a quick look at the upcoming schedule in the American. We discussed a few of these games already, but Titel, what about UConn and Syracuse on Thursday? UConn is off to a 2-0 start.
I feel weird that this is an American versus ACC game rather than a Big East game, but getting past that, yes. As a historian of the game, I think back to all the amazing players and rivalries between these two teams, so I'm glad they keep it going even in 2018.
You think UConn could pull off the upset?
If Frank Howard was still hurt, I think they'd have a shot, but I think that he's healthy, so I think that they're not going to lose to Connecticut.
To Syracuse?
I think Syracuse is not going to lose to Connecticut.
Right, okay, got it. David, I know you want to talk about this conference here. You want to talk about at losses. Here's even more of them, and here's the Atlantic 10.
That's true.
At the beginning of the year, in our Atlantic 10 podcast, I had commented on how we like a lot of the programs in this league and how it would be good for college basketball to have a second really good basketball-centric conference along with the Big East. And I think I made some comment about how a lot of teams are returning a lot of players, and I thought it would be better than what many were projecting. We need to go back and edit that podcast to make sure that does not get on record. Davidson 2-0. One of their wins was against Dartmouth, and if you watch Ivy League hoops, Dartmouth is not good. They had to come from behind, and they won that game by 3. Dayton, to be fair, at least they took care of business in their bye games, although they did sweat a little bit. Duquesne got blasted tonight. I don't even remember who Rhodey beat. Joe's has looked okay, but when you look at some of the games that this conference has lost, George Mason, who we thought was a top 40 team, not many people did, but we did, losing 2 bye games at home. Now, one was to American, who at the time we're recording this is within 2 of Northwestern. But still to lose to, was it Penn and American? If you're a top 40
champion Penn, yes, it was.
Yes. And nothing against Penn, but if you're a top 40 team, that's a game you win at home. You should be expected to win that at home. The Bonnies losing to Bucknell, GW losing to everybody they've played. Richmond, who beat them? It was somebody awful.
Longwood.
Yeah, Longwood. Jesus Christ. A team that's ninth, that's going to struggle to get into the top 10 of the Big South goes into Richmond and wins.
We'll take a look at the upcoming schedule here real quick in the A10. I don't know if there's much more worth talking about here, but there's the games. Harvard at UMass. Harvard's got the A10 with that Rhode Island also this week. I guess look at the Saturday game, St. Louis at Seton Hall. That might be the most interesting one there, Titel, unless I'm missing something else.
There's a Big 5 guy / City 6 guy. Of course, Drexel at LaSalle is the biggest game of the weekend.
Oh, okay.
I think the big question, Chad, is when can we start including the Atlantic 10 and under the radar? Because at their current pace, that is where they're headed.
Yeah, let's get to something a little bit better then, and let's take a look at at least one team that's better here. Let's take a look at the Mountain West.
There's a nasty one on this as well.
Yeah, Nevada off to the 2-0 start. I don't know that anyone else is really worth discussing from what they've done so far, but Joby, how about the Wolfpack?
Boise is tied with Texas San Antonio for being worst team in the country, right ahead of them. Richmond, who we just saw, lost to Longwood, was also in that tied for 349th, which you could say in reverse is tied for 351st. So, there's some ugly, too, because Boise and UNLV, with these losses this week to Loyola Marymount, these were 2 teams that were discussing about making a run, toying with at-large bids, kind of, at least in IT level. That's where these programs are. And not the best start for the year on the bottom of the conference from that standpoint. But the top, I'll give it away for those who want to talk about the wonderful team at the top.
Probably about 30 years too late in the case of Loyola Marymount.
Yeah, in terms of that wonderful team at the top, we see the upcoming schedule. They have Little Rock coming up on Friday, and then Cal Baptist, the one of the two newest team in D1 here,
Yeah.
coming up on Monday. Nothing to worry about this week, is there, David?
No, not for them.
Let's talk about one other very, very good team in Titel. Let's go out to the West Coast Conference, where Gonzaga, very impressive to start the season.
Everybody's now saying I like Rui Hachimura as much as the next guy. Everybody wants to make him an All-American now because he's getting 30 points a game and the team is scoring 100 points a game. Let's pump the brakes on that. Their schedule for the next 30 days is insane. Texas A&M, Illinois, Creighton, Washington, Tennessee, and North Carolina on the road. If they win out, of course they're a 1 seed, and of course they're going to be in the title game. Very tough schedule. I know they have a veteran crew and a great coach and everything. Tennessee and North Carolina back-to-back. Is that easy? They're going to be in trouble, I think.
Don't forget they got the trip to the Maui as well, correct?
Yeah, they do.
Well, they also have another red flag in that Killian Tilly is going to be out indefinitely with an injury. And as we saw last March, they lost to Florida State in the round of 16 when he was not available. So they're going to need Hachimura and guys like Gino Crandall to fill in for him while he's gone.
One more team I do want to mention, welcome to the top 25 in the poll that just came out this week. There's the Mid-American Conference standings, and there is the Buffalo Bulls, 2-0 with the win at West Virginia, looking like they're about to become 3-0 with a very nice road win tonight that they're on the process of locking down here, David, at Southern Illinois.
Yeah, and Southern Illinois, really good. We're really big on them, more on them on under the radar. So this is a team they won 20 games last year despite only having, I think they only went 6 deep, or was it 70? Either way, they lost a lot of key players to injuries, have everybody back this year from a 20-win team that was injury-ridden, and they're tough to beat at home. And in Buffalo, going in there, running away with it. This is their second really, it's not on the level of West Virginia by any means, but to win this decisively at a place like Southern Illinois, this Buffalo team is good. They're ranked 25th, and I don't think they're overrated.
And from what I'm seeing on the screen there, I think this is their only game this week. I don't actually see any other games listed there, so they should be in the top 25 again come next week.
Yeah.
And also keep in mind, as far as Buffalo and Southern Illinois, they're actually going to have a return game at Buffalo in December.
Oh, cool.
All right.
A little bit of they have blown it open. They're up 17 with it, and they just came out of the under 4. So Buffalo, really impressive win today. Are you surprised at how good they are? We thought that they might be able to get inside the bubble. This might be a team that ends up in on the first ballot. That's how good they've looked so far.
I'll tell you what, though, on that note, we want to spend the last section of this show talking about some of these exempt tournaments that are coming up. We mentioned them briefly as we went through there, but let me go ahead and pull up. This is in our in-season tab, tournament tab that you can see up there on the website. You can look at this anytime you like, and they will be updated with scores. But there are a lot of events that begin this week. I want to take a quick look through each of them and kind of ask each of you, what you're looking for and who you think is going to win some of these events here. And we're going to start starting Thursday with the Myrtle Beach Invitational, featuring teams like UCF, Western Kentucky, West Virginia. Titel, let me bring you in here. You like any matchups here? And is there a team you're looking at here to win this event?
I'm hoping that the title game, or at least one of the games on Sunday the 18th, is UCF against West Virginia, just to see Taco Fall and Sabado Gigante go against each other. I think it will be an amazing matchup of big men in the post. Although Kanate's hitting threes this year, so maybe he'll pull Fall out. We'll see.
All right. And Joby, we've also got coming up this week, starting Thursday, the Charleston Classic. I know you've got some Alabama ties. We also see Purdue, Wichita State, and Davidson and Vatek in there.
Yeah, all of Alabama's best players are either in the NBA or at Virginia now. So, but that's some real talent though at the heart and soul. I expect a Virginia Tech who I see as the number, even with the loss of Clark, the 4th or 5th best team in the ACC, along with Syracuse, versus a Purdue team that, yes, you lose Haas, but the Purdue is still a very solid squad this year. Purdue, and Wichita State, rebounding obviously from their loss to Louisiana Tech, but I do expect Purdue, Virginia Tech, and let's see if the Hokies win one for the ACC. I think it's very possible.
And do you get the sense, well, Northeastern, another team to kind of keep an eye on there if they can steal a couple big wins. But this one and the first one, some of these teams that we just got through talking about in conferences getting off to a slow start, this is how they can remedy that quickly. I mean, if you see some teams from the American run through some of these tournaments, suddenly we're having very different discussions.
Yeah, Wichita State wins the Charleston Classic, and we could forget about that Louisiana Tech loss.
Right.
And we're now talking about them as a top 25 team.
Right, yeah.
And if Davidson beats Wichita State, then they can forget about barely beating Dartmouth.
Yeah.
Stalika, we mentioned that Syracuse-UConn game, Oregon-Iowa, the other half of the 2K Empire Classic there. Is this all Syracuse, or can Oregon knock them off?
I actually think UConn can surprise Syracuse in the opener, but I think with Oregon managing to beat Iowa, I would probably give Oregon the edge to beat UConn in the final here.
Right. And David, we're going to be for completeness sake. There is a bracketed event among the visitors teams here: Morehead State, UMKC, Green Bay, and Eastern Washington. You want to give us a pick?
Well, Eastern Washington hosting it, you kind of have to go with that. None of these teams, although if you did watch, Morehead State kind of played with Syracuse in that game a little bit, whereas against both UConn and Syracuse.
Okay,
but they were down. I mean, they were within one as late as the under-16 timeout in the second half, I think, of that, if I remember right. But how crazy is it that one of those teams is actually going to win a trophy?
Titel, the Island of the Bahamas showcase. Montana, Incarnate Word, Georgia Southern, Towson, Pepperdine. Come on. Anything?
Atlantic.
I assumed this was going to be a no TV or streaming event as well.
There is a website there. You can see it. Yep.
As somebody who spent many happy summers in Malibu at summer camp, see all the stuff that Malibu and Pepperdine is going through, I hope the players can stay focused on the task at hand, because the entire region is literally burning to the ground. So I wish everyone well, because it is not a good scene out west.
I think to follow up on that, they've already postponed a home game against Northridge and are currently scheduled to play at Northern Colorado tomorrow night. But everything as far as classes are going to be canceled until at least after Thanksgiving break as far as Pepperdine goes.
Yeah, they've canceled their entire athletic schedule until after any home athletic contest until after Thanksgiving for all sports there. So our best wishes to all of them. As far as this event goes, I'd keep an eye on Montana if you want to pick a winner. I am picking them among the best teams in the Big Sky. But Joby, we got the Paradise Jam next, slightly better field here, including the likes of Missouri, Titel's Penn team, and K-State there.
K-State. Well, I'm on the K-State bandwagon this year. Yes, Bruce Weber. We've talked about it. Redeemed himself in Hoops HD world among most folks. I see K-State actually slicing through this field because Missouri lost yet another Porter. I don't see them doing it. Maybe Titel's alma mater because that's my pick for the Ivy. But I think K-State's storming through this group and showing why they're a top 25 ranked team.
But I'll give you one dark horse here, and it's actually a team that's won the Paradise Jam previously, and that's going to be Old Dominion.
Yeah, Old Dominion could make some noise here. But Titel, you want to make a case why Penn is going to win this event?
I hope they don't, because I was this close to buying a plane ticket to go cover it. Not a cheap ticket, by the way. I like our chances. I mean, we're playing good. I wouldn't sleep on the Beavers, man. I know that Oregon State has a bad track record of being a basketball team in Division I, but they got Tinkle, they got Thompson, they're playing well. Don't sleep on them. I know ODU is good too, but keep an eye on them.
I kind of agree with that. This might be one of those events, and you see it every year, where at least one and sometimes multiple teams just get slingshot onto the national stage after they do well in these tournaments. Believe it or not, it was Wazoo last year. Remember when they were ranked well, you probably don't because they weren't in there for very long, but ranked in the top 25 for about a week or two.
Oh, that was the Wooden Legacy, I think, where Washington State made their splash.
Yeah, but I mean, in these exempt events, there's going to be someone that comes out of nowhere, and maybe they'll actually stay up there. I kind of like this Oregon State team this year.
David, let me stick with you here. There's two brackets in the Air Force Reserve tip-off. This was formerly the Hall of Fame tip-off. The first one with Holy Cross, Stony Brook, Norfolk State, and Siena. But in all seriousness, we've got Michigan, South Carolina, Providence, and GW down in the Naismith bracket.
Well, I mean, none of these teams have really been tested yet or looked. None of these teams have looked all that impressive in after winning a big test yet, but a few of them have looked very disappointing, namely South Carolina and Providence and George Washington. So by default, I think Michigan wins this on the grounds that they have not disappointed me yet.
Okay. Let's bring up this is the Gulf Coast Showcase. This year it is related to the NIT season tip-off in some weird way in order to do with some of the fourth games that are going in there for some of these teams. But Stalika, you being an under-the-radar guy as well, let me give this one over to you here, including that South Dakota State team in this event.
I think South Dakota has to be one of the clear favorites here, but another dark horse to keep an eye on, I would probably say Colorado State, because I believe this is the first year where Nico Medved is going to be coaching there. So
I'm really circling that idea of a South Dakota State UC Irvine semifinal.
Yeah, that would be fine.
Yeah. Of course, you can't ignore Gulf Coast on the bottom half of the bracket either.
No, but you can ignore Texas San Antonio and perhaps Tulane as well. So I think that the likelihood of a UC Irvine South Dakota State semifinal is high.
Tulane has a little bit of life in them. I wouldn't completely ignore them.
Yeah.
Titel, let me give you this one here, the Cayman Islands Classic with the likes of Clemson, Georgia State, Creighton.
I think this is a Clemson big, which you can enjoy on Stadium Facebook Live, apparently. I think Georgia is not up to par. I think the Bonnies took a big downturn this year after losing a couple of star players. Creighton was unimpressive the other night. I think Clemson is going to own this tournament.
I would not sleep on either Illinois State or Georgia State in this event. These are a couple of teams. Illinois State I think may end up being the best team in the Missouri Valley Conference. A lot of people did pick them even higher than Loyola. Georgia State, the best team in the Sun Belt, in my opinion, as well.
I think so too. They went out to Montana and didn't get the win, but they were right in there for most of the game. And Montana, especially at Montana, is harder to win than beating most of these teams on the neutral floor, minus maybe Clemson.
There is also a 4-team mainland bracket for the Cayman Islands Classic, featuring the likes of East Tennessee State and 3 other teams.
If you're these 4 teams, you're going, I could have gone to the Caymans by going to Johnson City, Tennessee instead.
That's the Smoky Mountains. Come on, it's a nice area.
I guess they can go to Dollywood, I mean, it's not like every one of the teams that's in the group of it.
It is. Yeah, it's a nice part of the country, but it is a rather large contrast to the Cayman Islands. I mean, you don't exactly think like island fare or in Johnson City, Tennessee.
I have been to Johnson City.
I have been there as well.
It's very different than the Caymans.
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that's the site of one of the greatest administrative blunders ever, when the referees didn't show up because there weren't any.
I thought that was in Nashville, but
okay, never mind.
Yeah, but Joby, let me give you a better island. How about out in Hawaii here, and probably what I think is going to be the premier event of all these events.
I mean, this is how good the event is. We've already individually talked about most of these teams, in their conferences. Obviously, let's look at Duke and the freshmen. That easily jumps out. The Zags, this is where the Zags make their difference. The team to watch maybe is Iowa State. I know the Big 12 wasn't perfect thanks to the Sooner State pair, but Iowa State, they might be a tournament level team. They're going to have to show it out west against Arizona, Titel's Arizona team. I think they will. And then they get they presumably, I think the brackets match up where they get the big test against Gonzaga. And how about that? That you get your shot, Iowa State. If you win it, you are looking really good as long as you have a solid Big 12 season.
I've lost count of how many times Tytel's been shaking his head, but I'm sure it has to do with Lindell Wigginton's absence because he also has a cast on his foot as well as no timetable for his return.
That's only part of it, as Zoran Talley and Cameron Lard are both suspended 7 games. Joby, I understand your analysis. I think that Arizona's going to win big only because half of the Cyclones are gone.
Very good point.
Well, Titel, can Arizona win beyond that first game?
I wish we weren't playing Gonzaga. We have a history of beating them in March, and I think that Mark Few especially has been waiting a long time for some payback. We also have had a couple regular season games against them. I'm telling you, though, like Auburn-Xavier game, it could be one of the best quarterfinals I've ever seen. I mean, that's amazing.
It might be one of the worst quarterfinals you've ever seen.
I love that Auburn-Duke semifinal if it happens, though, Dave. Or maybe a consolation semifinal. Who knows? But
Xavier against Evansville, an Evansville team that we're not expecting much out of, even by under-the-radar standards. Xavier's defense appeared to be – their defensive strategy appeared to be to get out of their way and hope they missed. And I could see that not working against Auburn.
Well, here's the thing, though. I think Evansville was 17 for 31 from three-point land, but they were only about 10 for 30 from 2 points. So it was kind of a pick your poison.
Well, David, let me go back to here for the Legends Classic. St. John's, Cal, Temple, VCU. Is this bracket set up for St. John's to actually make some noise in Brooklyn?
Yeah, I think it is. And, kind of right there in their backyard. I really like this Temple team too, though. VCU, real nice win the night. Well, they weren't really playing anybody. But, I mean, it was an Atlantic 10 team that didn't look lousy. So, I mean, something to take away from that. But, yeah, St. John's, while they struggled against Bowling Green earlier in the week, I'm not that big on them like the rest of you all seem to be, but I'll start to pay attention to them a little more if they win this tournament.
And the bottom half of the event there, Joby, Bowling Green, Hampton, Loyola, Detroit. Detroit, though, Mike Davis' son there is off to a great start to the season. I think scored 30 points each of the first 2 games. I don't know what he had tonight against Butler, but.
Well, and once again, this is not going to be looked at very much, but Detroit gets to at least host the tournament. And so, unfortunately for them, they don't get the neutral, but they probably get the favorite, role. They've been on the cusp, of getting relevance. Oakland and others have taken it from them in that area of the under the radar teams. But maybe this is where they break out. Hampton, we know, has had their magic in March before, but and now sits in a new conference. So from the old MEAC days. So
by the way, that is Loyola Maryland there, not Loyola Chicago.
And Detroit should win that. I would presume.
And Antoine Davis 20 points tonight against Butler, so his worst game by 10 points in his 3 games of his collegiate career so far.
So I would think Detroit would be the favorite, though. We'll see Bowling Green. We'll see if Bowling Green can do something.
David, I'll give it to you. I hate to do it. The Hall of Fame Classic.
Oh yes, Missouri State and Nebraska, Texas. Well, I mean, again, it's just the Nebraska Classic is what it is. I mean, of course, it's the Hall of Fame. Nebraska ranked number 1 in the nation, rightfully so. And how can you not like them to continue to win by 60 points?
The Texas Tech USC game, I think, is an interesting one, and the winner playing in Nebraska is an interesting game. I think we have a couple of pretty interesting-looking games there, though, Titel. Don't you agree?
I do, but David, I wouldn't sleep on playing Missouri State in the state of Missouri. I understand Nebraska should win. I hope they're not looking ahead and assuming they've already got the title game wrapped up.
Well, no, I mean, that's just not what number 1 teams do. They don't look ahead.
Stalika, the Fort Myers tip-off, an interesting potential Boston College Loyola Chicago game, and a Boston College team that's slightly improved, I think, and Loyola obviously for the Final Four last year.
Yeah, of course, Loyola also did have a bit of a toe stub at home against Furman, but
Yeah.
that was certainly nothing compared to what Richmond did.
Yeah.
I was even mentioning Richmond.
Loyola Chicago stubbed their toes. Richmond cut their heads off.
And Wyoming is really a poor team, to be very honest.
The visitors bracket taking place that Niagara is going to be hosting, probably making them the favorite there with SFBK, IUPUI, and Grambling in that bracket as well.
How about if Grambling could win a couple of those? That would be something.
Well, of course, who knows? Is St. Francis, who won their first game, their own version of a bye game against D2, challenged, as we know, BC. Is that showing some life? So let's not completely look aside to St. Francis there.
I just don't think BC's any good.
I think BC's okay, so that's why I think I'm more giving St. Francis a little credit.
Titel, you being our Arizona guy, let's talk about the MGM Resorts main event heavyweight bracket and your good friends from Arizona State. Are there two teams with the same conference in this event, or is there a mistake on the screen there?
There are two teams from the same conference in this event.
Okay.
Ironically, I think the team traveling the farthest, Mississippi State, is going to win this one because they look amazing so far. They have multiple Weatherspoons. They got Reggie Perry, a McDonald's All-American. So I will pick the Bulldogs to win it all.
Yep.
But I think this might be permissible in that Arizona State and Utah may only be slated to face each other once in the regular season. So I suppose that's where an exception could be made.
Either that or the other possibility is that it's not an exempt event.
No, it is an exempt. It is exempt. So that's,
it is exempt.
Yeah,
okay.
That one I can.
It's also the second straight year that Arizona State's going to be in Las Vegas, but not the same venue as last year.
Also in Las Vegas, David, will be our good friend Tim Cluse with Iona in the middleweight bracket down there on the bottom.
Yeah, our good friend Tim Cluse, glad to have the pressure of the offseason behind them. With players getting suspended and for
bad stuff, yeah.
Bad stuff, yeah.
But let's go out to Cancun. The Cancun Challenge, the main bracket, the Riviera bracket, and Joby, SMU, Bradley, Penn State, and Wright State in that event.
Penn State has got to show themselves if they want. They've shown improvement over the last few years in record, but they don't have the heft in their schedule. Wright State, I think David might know more about Wright State than I do for this particular season, but Wright State's a solid program. Are they looking at 20 wins again this year, 25?
Yes.
If so, then Penn State, A, better watch out, but B, it's a good win if Penn State gets it. Yeah, SMU, Bradley, SMU, I think SMU's about to have a really bad year for
right.
SMU.
Wright State
15 and 15 years, so I don't know how much you get out of that. And Bradley is still, mediocre as far as the MVC goes.
Yeah, Wright State, Scott and Agee done a very good job there. They won 26 games a year ago and bring 6 of their top 7 players back. And the thing is, they started off 0-3 last year. They started off this year with a 20-point loss at Murray State, which goes to I'm starting to develop a theory.
Yeah,
Wright State just doesn't start playing until December.
The Mayan bracket there's a chance for a very interesting championship game that might actually be worth watching there between Jacksonville State and Southern Miss. Two very competitive teams there, David, that I like both of them.
Yes, Jack State had a decent game tonight again. Holy crap, who did they play? Was it Penn State?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, they were right in there for most of the game. I don't think Jack State – I mean, I think they're good by OVC standards. I don't really think they're as good as Southern Miss. Southern Miss, a really good story. Picked up a big road win earlier this week. Was it at – help me out here, Chad. Who did they beat?
SMU.
Yeah, SMU. It stopped a 33-game win streak. And Doc Sadler, I actually do know something about them, even though I can't remember who it is they played, but took over a complete and total mess, and he's got them respectable, and they could be a factor in that conference this year. So I kind of like them to win this event. I think they're clearly the best team in it.
An event that is normally one of the top events of the year, slightly down compared to prior years, but still a great field.
Hey.
Titel, the Battle for Atlantis, probably because there's only 3 or 4 really good teams as opposed to 6 or 7 really good teams, but still a very nice field here.
It is. I'll defer to Joby, of course. Even if Virginia is the best team in the conference, in the tournament, sorry about that, I think that the best player by far is Ethan App of Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Triple-double in his first game. Unbelievable.
I agree. He was my Big Ten Player of the Year. I think, hey, knock on wood from a Virginia perspective, I think you will see a very boring final, which means Wisconsin-Virginia basketball, baby. For once again, we'll meet for the 4th time in 5 years.
I think Wisconsin's going to have trouble getting by Florida in the semifinal. That could be their
Florida just looked awful against Florida State. I know Florida State's good, but, man, a 20-point – they got drilled. And I'm not saying Florida's a bad team, but I think Wisconsin is a much better team this year. Plus, Florida is the type of team – the SEC teams in particular have this issue – when they play against the pack line. They do not play against the pack line very effectively. And that's why I actually think that Wisconsin would be my honest pick as a favorite over Florida, even with Florida's talent.
Well, let's David, let me give you the NIT season tip-off, the real NIT season tip-off. Real interesting field here and a chance for a Tennessee-Kansas potential Final Four caliber final.
Yeah, more than a chance. Louisville, I just don't think that they're at this caliber with any of these teams, particularly not Tennessee or Kansas. The Louisville-Marquette game might be fairly interesting if that holds up. Marquette, who we really like, I think that they're just kind of in over their heads in that first game, but they should be able to pick up the second one. But a pretty good field here.
Yeah, I think we had a little computer glitch there, but I got that fixed. Yeah, I think we're in for a great field here. And Stalika, let me go to you for the next. Another very good field, as we always have in the Advocare, including our defending national champions from Villanova. We got LSU there. We got that Florida State team we just discussed.
You can certainly pencil in Villanova to the final, but Florida State and LSU should actually be an entertaining semifinal. I think the Noles actually make it to the title game, but aren't going to be a match for Villanova. Although a third-place game between Memphis and LSU could also be somewhat interesting as well.
Especially since they play this week already.
And we missed Titel when we discussed Oklahoma State earlier. Since they're in this event, let me throw this over to you here. I know you wanted to bring this up.
So stick with me for this one. You got this Charlotte-Oklahoma State game, which I wasn't caring about to start with. And I was caring even less about it when the Cowboys were up by 24 points with 12 minutes left. Talk about a young team for Oklahoma State. 3 juniors and 6 freshmen were their 9 players. No seniors and no sophomores. The reason that they were up so big, the 49ers were terrible to start. 22 turnovers in the game. They were amazing at the free throw line, however, 19 of 21. And who do you depend on at the end? A senior, of course, John Davis, the game-winning 3 in the final seconds. Look at this win probability chart that goes and goes and goes and falls off the cliff in the final second. Unbelievable.
They had a 0.2% chance of winning this game at one point. A 0.2% chance. It's ridiculous.
One of our favorite, but yeah. And again, our friend Ken Palm had been on the show. We showed him some of these. We'll have to get him to explain this one to us someday.
But let's, David, let me stick with you here. The Wooden Legacy, another fairly big event, although not quite as good of a field as some of these other events we've discussed already.
Yeah, this one has always been sort of a B- C+ field, decent but not great. Wow,
like
is anybody in this field actually solidly inside the bubble? Or, I mean, I know it's early. They could all end up there. There's no one here that really jumps out of me other than the Lobes. What if the Lobes win this? Then it's a great event.
Okay, you got Hawaii, you got Utah, you've got Miami, maybe, Joby?
Well, I mean, as I was saying, the B- C+, you just described Fullerton, California. So,
yeah,
generally. But no, Miami, Larinaga has gotten some issues pop up recently. So that's obviously something of concern. I would go with Miami in this field. But it's all of these teams you could see in the NIT. This looks like an NIT Final 8.
All right, give me half a second here. David, take it over for a second here. Just try to get things fixed up. Okay, never mind. I got it, David. Let me go ahead and let you talk about the next event here. The Las Vegas Holiday Invitational, not to be confused with the other Las Vegas Invitational we'll get to in a minute, but this one in the main event has UMass Southern Illinois, who just lost tonight, and of course that Nevada team, and Frank Haith.
Well, yeah, and I am going to watch every second and love every second of what Nevada is going to do to Frank Haith. I think it's going to be amazing, and really just an underwhelming tournament outside of Nevada, which is really kind of unfortunate. If Nevada was in one of the bigger ones, particularly Maui, but any of them, they could probably rack up at least get the chance to some wins that'll impress the committee. These are just like decent wins away from home at best, which again, they're not in any danger of missing it, but if you're talking about pushing for a 1 seed, pushing for a 2 seed, you'd like to see them get a better chances than this in an exempt event.
And when you say away from home, while it is a long way from Reno, I think I know who the crowd's going to be rooting for.
Yeah.
And the reason why I had a slight pause there, I was trying to confirm something. We did have a mistake earlier in the show, which I need to apologize for. That it was not Utah participating in the event with Arizona State. That is Utah State in that event, and which explains why we had 2 teams. We thought we had 2 teams in the same conference. It didn't make any sense. So go back, ignore that whole section. It's Utah State. They will not win the event, so don't think about them again. That was the event with St. Mary's, Mississippi State, and Arizona State. But Cal Baptist, Stalica, down in the visitors bracket of that Holiday Invitational. Can they win it?
They can certainly win it. Little Rock certainly should be a favorite at home, but I think Howard is another team to possibly pay attention to if either Cal Baptist nor Little Rock pull it off.
But let's talk about what maybe the other premier, or at least definitely the premier 4-team event. Tytel, let me give this one to you. North Carolina, Texas, UCLA, Michigan State in the Las Vegas non-holiday invitational.
I thought we were running out of tournaments to have in Vegas, but I'm happy to report that we are dead wrong because this is going to be a great one. I like Carolina, but to be honest, they're all 4 solid teams with solid coaches, so it could go any way, I think. It's a long trip for the Heels, of course. Texas has been mediocre, I think, so far. UCLA is young but great, and Michigan State almost beat Kansas, so it should be fantastic. I'll go with the Heels.
You'll go with the Heels. Joby, agree with him, the Heels?
Yeah, I still think Izzo's got some tricks up his sleeve, but usually they don't come out until March. But, hey, I don't see UCLA. I see UCLA as the weak link here, to be truthful. Any of the other 3, because I think Shaka could. North Carolina's not going, especially with Duke, but I don't think with their tough out-of-conference schedule, they're going to go undefeated out of conference. This may be that loss. Who knows?
Well, Stalica, this is Cincinnati's event next, the Emerald Coast Classic, along with George Mason. Ultra disappointing Baylor, who lost to Texas Southern, and Ole Miss. Can Cincinnati at least win this event?
If Cincinnati does not win the event, they're going to have even more problems along with the American than we initially thought.
And David, the visitors bracket there, you want to give us a pick on that Nichols State, Western Michigan final?
Yeah, Nichols.
Okay. Belfast. 2 brackets this year in Belfast instead of just 1. 2 thrilling ones. Tytel, Marist, Albany, Brooklyn, Dartmouth, Milwaukee, Buffalo, SFA, and San Fran in the bottom one.
It's a long trip for San Francisco.
I got to tell you, if the whole nation of Ireland does not fall in love with college basketball after this event, I don't know what else we can do. We are the
Tytel, any thoughts on this thing here? I mean, other than Buffalo, of course.
That's the only thought you need to concern yourself with. Buffalo, big and easy abroad.
An Ireland tournament without the Irish, that is unusual, actually.
A couple non-exempt events, but they are bracketed, so we'll just mention them quickly. East Tennessee State, Wyoming, Norfolk State, and UTEP in the Sun Bowl Invitational. David, you have a pick for us there?
East Tennessee State.
Okay. My backyard here, Battle of the Boardwalk with powers like Tulane, Towson, Alabama A&M. I mean, I guess this is LaSalle's event because they're the quote-unquote home team here, but not much of an event.
Good job. Well, this is about what you would expect.
We're at the end of the show here.
Yeah,
The St.
like,
Pete
yeah.
shootout. Come on. Keep an eye on Chris Clemens there in the St. Pete shootout for Campbell. He's a great player to watch. I think that's one comment there.
Another Vegas tournament.
Another Vegas tournament in December here with, even though it's on FS1, it's still not much of a field. I don't know what to say about these events.
I got to think New Mexico State probably wins that one.
Yeah,
but
New Mexico State, San Diego would be – we would talk about it on Under the Radar if those two were to play during the year. So at least it's that.
I actually like in the other one that neat little Northern Colorado Rider game.
Neat is an interesting word for it.
Yeah, I like Ryder a lot. I'm not that crazy.
Yeah, I'm not big on
Actually, Northridge looked pretty good in their first game, though. So, keep an eye on them maybe. But let's go to the very last event. Ty, let me bring you in here on the Diamond Head Classic right before and at Christmas time with the likes of TCU and 7 other teams.
Yeah, TCU has to be the favorite. I love a bunch of solid mid-majors like Rhode Island and Bucknell. I'm not sold on Colorado, so I think it's TCU's tournament to lose. But again, like the direct flight to Honolulu from Texas is a long one, so there's a lot of Western teams that could ruin that for the Horned Frogs.
And we did discuss Charlotte's big win earlier a few moments ago. That win, so you never know.
Right.
Now, unlike earlier, we can confirm that Hawaii is actually part of 3 tournaments this year with the Diamond Head Classic they're hosting, along with the Rainbow Classic, which is not bracketed, but still a 3-team event, as well as the Wooden Legacy.
Well, when you play in Hawaii, you got to have a lot of events. I think that's kind of the thing there. But on that note, let me go ahead and pull this all down here. And I guess let's run through any other final thoughts from each of you. I think we've covered everything else. It's been a fairly long show. But Joby, let me start with you. Any other thoughts about anything we've seen or these events or anything else you want to discuss?
Yeah. I mean, I think the Gavitt games, the Gavitt Challenge is going to mean a lot. The Big Ten last year really got behind the 8 ball after the ACC Big Ten Challenge. They got both of them this year. They cannot afford for that to happen again. And I think how the Gavitt Challenge turns out against the Big East will have a big impact on whether that from last year, the equivalent of last year's Penn State, Nebraska, a 13-5 really does mean something or not. This will be a building block this week.
All right, Stalika.
Well, in recent years, the neutral game in China has become kind of a fixture for Pac-12 teams. So next year they're going to expand their horizons a little bit with Colorado and Arizona State both scheduled to play each other. They're only scheduled to meet once as far as the regular season, so this will actually count only as far as non-conference standings go.
Oh, really? So it's not a conference game then?
Not next year.
That's interesting. Titel.
So I mentioned a few weeks ago that I finally had a guy on my hating list in terms of Breon Tyree of Ole Miss because his cousin David made the helmet catch to beat my Patriots back in the day. So he's not exactly joined on the list by A.J. Reeves of Providence, but A.J., I have some questions about your loyalties. He's off to a great start as a 6'6 freshman for the Friars. 29 against Siena, 19 against Wichita State. He's averaging 24 points a game. He's looking great. Then I check out his bio, and he's from Massachusetts, so his favorite team, Celtics, Patriots, Bruins, Red Sox. I'm like, finally, some kid I can get behind is a proud Boston-born kid. His favorite athlete with all these Boston teams and coming from Massachusetts, Kobe Bryant.
I'll tell you what, David, before I go to you for my final thought, I want to finish off that little correction we made here. Quickly for anybody that was watching the show, that is the correct event bracket for the MGM Resorts main event heavyweight bracket. St. Mary's, Utah State, Arizona State, Mississippi State. So my apologies to all those Utes fans that suddenly thought they were playing in an extra event and need to quickly book those tickets to Vegas.
Right. Yeah.
Still go to Vegas, but you don't get to see your team. But David, your final thoughts.
Two really quick. It's been from under the radar standpoint, especially Conference USA, it's been kind of a wild start to the season. We'll be recording that Wednesday night. Be sure and tune in for that because there's quite a bit to discuss. And secondly, I just want to remind everybody tomorrow, Tuesday, please get out there and vote. It's a big midterm election. We'll see how that goes.
David, you realize that was last week.
No, it's always the Tuesday after. Last week was the start of the season. There's no way they'd have election day on the start of the college basketball season.
Titel is slamming the buzzer there. Unfortunately, I can't get the sound to work right now. I've got to work on that. But let me see here. I do want to thank everyone for joining us. On behalf of John Titel and John Salika up here, Joby Fortson and David Griggs down there, I'm Chad Sherwood. This has been the Hoops HD Report. I just want to, also want to congratulate Titel on your getting your MD as well, I believe, correct? Is that correct?
Hoops MD, the best medical basketball site in the world.
HoopsMD.com. On that note, thanks for joining us, everyone, and we'll talk to you again real soon.